Hi everyone, this is Leanne. This is from the heart. I am a self-exiled midwife. I left the profession because what we are doing in the profession does not add up to evidence what women want. And the data really proves it, really unfortunately, with the increase in very, very severe adverse outcomes that we are seeing in Canada. So today I want to talk about trauma and how trauma affects women in the care that they receive, and sometimes how we perceive what these women need. So, one of the things that I've seen really um, caring, compassionate care providers is um, offer the epidural. The part that's like not okay is that we think that the epidural is the only tool in the toolbox that we have to help them. And it's not really understanding the context of trauma. So for some women, the tool of the epidural is a blessing when she's in labor, being induced especially, could be a really great thing if she wants it. Now, the other things that we don't consider when we are offering the epidural is that when someone receives an epidural, needles are really scary for a lot of women, no matter what type of trauma that they've had. And it's none of our business what type of trauma they might have had. But getting a needle, especially behind you, getting needles, because there's the freezing part and then there's the inserting the tube with the needle that then comes out. But when that happens, um, like trauma is pretty significant at that moment. And we need to we need to educate the anesthesiologist really on how to provide epidurals in a way where there's a better bedside manner. So we do that, and we're a little bit more informed when it comes to vaginal exams. But anytime that there is something where a woman doesn't feel in control is a time for us to apply that sort of mindfulness and patience and going slower and hearing her. Those things go a long way. Um, and when someone is behind you, that can be really pretty traumatic. So sometimes the epidural is really not the thing for her. The other thing that we're telling her with the epidural is that with the epidural, she's then confined to the bed. She might be able to step down from the bed. She might be able to walk to the toilet. That doesn't happen very often. And asking her to not be in control of her body could also be really traumatic for her as well. So those are just things that we need to keep into our knowledge toolbox, integrate it into practice so that when we offer the epidural, it's not about the idea that we're going to convince her to have the epidural. The other thing is we don't know who has these sorts of traumas and feelings around the epidural and who's going to be traumatized about needles and being confined to a bed. Sometimes trauma just happens because of what happens to her best friend. It's like a secondary sort of PTSD. I'm like overusing the word PTSD here, but um, those are just things that we need to be mindful of more. Um, while I've been creating my course, I've found out some things that we do that aren't really evidence-based, but we tell each other that they are. So now that I'm talking about trauma, I'm going to be talking about vaginal exams and a case that happened in Australia. So we like to really tell each other what happens in the United States about the things that happens to babies and how we can sue one another kind of thing, and what happens in the United States is very different than what happens in Canada. In the United States, for example, if a child breaks her arm, mom doesn't have enough health or illness care coverage, they can get the cast, but they can't get it removed because that's not considered an emergency. In Canada, that's not the case. So if wherever the child broke their arm, the mom then has to sue that place to get the money to remove the cast. So it's a very different system, and using the United States as an example of how we sue one another is not really relevant to Canada. And I know that there's a lot of people who think that the way that they do things in the United States is what needs to be happening here. I really do like the system of prioritization rather than like money over other people. And when we look at outcomes, because outcomes really does matter to me, when we look at outcomes, we're still better in Canada. So when it comes to the really severe maternal adverse outcomes and other outcomes, we're not necessarily comparable to the United States, except for Ontario right now. Um, Things that we need to work on. We have a better system already, um, but there's actually a lot of things that we can do to make it a lot better. One of the things, like I want to mention him more, is James Maskell. He wrote a book called The Community Cure. He is a economist who's really focusing on healthcare and creating healthcare. So moving away from what I call illness care, non-care, to, because it's the truth. That's just the truth, right? So moving from that into creating more functional medicine, which is what is evidence-based. So pharmaceutical first care is the non-care. It doesn't really help. It doesn't prevent. If we keep people healthy, that's evidence-based. And then if less and less people from that group become ill, then that's evidence-based. So that's a really small, it's a $1 book. He doesn't want to make money. It's on Amazon. And it's got lots of like tools and resources that can inspire us, no matter if we're a pharmacist, if we're a midwife, if we're whatever, a naturopath, like a physiotherapist, all the things. How can we sort of change our practice that is more in alignment with creating health and creating health in a healthcare system? That would be evidence-based, right? So, okay, so now when it comes to going back to being sued, there's a case that happened in Australia where a woman showed up in labor and said, I'm going to decline all vaginal exams. And then something happened in her care where they pressured her into having a vaginal exam. They created, so she said the only time that she would want a vaginal exam is in an emergency. So they sort of created that emergency. And she then accepted the vaginal exam at that point, but then realized that it wasn't an emergency. So it was sexual abuse. And she sued them and won. So this is like, I'm saying that women matter too. And so what I hear from her, that story, is the lack of education that she had around vaginal exams. And it also tells me that the care providers also have a lack of education around how to assess for progress. And vaginal exams are a very, intimate, trauma-inducing experience for some people. And thankfully, we have grown into having better bedside manner. But can we start telling each other the truth about what is evidence-based in practice and how to perform vaginal exams? And the truth is, when we look at the evidence, there's almost none. And to do vaginal exams every 2 hours is not evidence-based for low-risk women, and even moderate-risk women as well, depending what the situation is. And then every 4 hours is also not evidence-based, which is what I've been told my entire career. It's like, I feel really used by the system. People telling me that things are evidence-based, and then me being overworked, not looking at these things like the studies. I'm really happy that I quit. I feel like I'm not going to be used by the system anymore, and I can finally use my voice and keep learning and say it, So the part that is evidence-based about vaginal exams is actually the time of admission. To have that sort of clear timing that the woman is at least, more of the evidence points to being 6 centimeters. not 4 centimeters like we do in Canada and the UK. The United States has actually just opened up their like admission time to be between 4 and 6 centimeters. That's more evidence-based care. They just started doing that. That's going to reduce intervention. That's going to reduce C-section. And when we do that, that's going to increase better outcomes. And that's actually a really significant one, the time of admission, the time when we go and seek care, and pushing it longer, like seriously reduces intervention, which then reduces morbidity. So we need to have better education for ourselves. And then when a woman says, I don't want to follow policy, like exams every 2 hours is policy in a lot of places, then we can calm down when we know that stuff. You know, like, is she bleeding abnormally? That's different. And that rarely happens. So for all the other women, can we assess progress in a different way? And there's evidence for that. There's evidence for us in assessing women visually, and how she is sounding and how labor is progressing and what she's reporting to us. So we need to improve our skills. One of the things that I did as a preceptor is I really, really like to ask my student, okay, it's time by policy to, examine her. So can you guess where she's at based on how she's doing in labor, what she sounds like, what she looks like? Can you guess? And then, like, if we practice that as students all the time, this is impossible with the epidural, but you could feel and you could assess the contraction pattern. That's about it with an epidural with your hands. That would be more in line with evidence that we have today. And it would reduce infection for women, it would reduce intervention for women, it would reduce morbidity for women, and it's in line with what they might want. So every woman is different. Some people really want that number that might progressing. But if we were to educate them better and say your body needs time, and we'll know when to assess you based on how your body is doing. I can offer you, because it's policy, an exam every 4 hours or whatever. But education for ourselves and for clients would be really good. And I've been talking to people who have decided to do unassisted births. Calling it free birth is not what they want. They don't want to be in another system. They don't want to be thought of as doing something extreme. They just want to be seen as someone who decided based on their experiences from before, actually. And they actually don't advocate for themselves in our faces. They don't tell us that they had a bad experience, that they didn't like it, that they don't want to do it again. They just decide to do differently next time. And so can we open up that door of saying, I'm happy to have, how do you feel about your birth? I'm here for you. Are we able to, because the system is a lot more shared care now. So the person that is at the birth is not necessarily there for the rest of the care, if there is any care after that. But we need to be able to create a dialogue and to be able to receive it. And I know that midwives have a little bit more of that, maybe a lot more of that than some other clinicians, but the women who receive care from obstetricians, they don't necessarily want midwifery care because we're so one and the same. They want something very different. Okay, well, I'm going to go into the next topic. I was going to make a second episode, and the episode was on that. it was on like free birth, and it was on how midwives actually treat one another and treat the people who might assist these unassisted births. So like non-medical people who um, I'm not sure if they choose or if they just say that they're available for specific women, how they get paid. I don't know. And I'm not here to find out. I really just want to hear women out because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. So these women are making these decisions to have these unassisted births. And it's not necessarily through marketing of the Instagram and things like that. Um, it's actually based on their experience. And it's true that we don't have enough midwives to go around. And it's true that as midwifery has evolved, there's been more of a culture of trying to be like what we do in the illness care system. There isn't very much difference anymore. Like people think that the only difference is like home visits now. So listening to what women want is really important. Will lead to better things because if women want less vaginal exams, that's actually in line with evidence. A very, very major lack of evidence. And the more that I look at evidence and properly done evidence, um, what women are asking is actually a lot more in line. And there's something there with intuition and women who know how to advocate and know how to make decisions for themselves. Um, so when it comes to like the assisted birth, there's like a little bit of a plan in my head because I know how to assess people. I just know how to look at people and know if they made decisions from intuition, and then kind of see the outcomes. And anyhow, we'll see because it's not a lot of women who make those decisions, but it is a growing number of women, and we need to listen to them instead of making college complaints to midwives. To the midwifery college. It could be any baby catcher college, really. Um, but the resources at the midwifery college, Ontario specifically, is so little. So why are we fighting women? Why are we fighting women? So anyhow, like there might be a reason, especially if there's adverse outcomes and planned adverse outcomes. That's very different. And these women are not like they know that there's more adverse outcomes when they make those decisions. It's not hidden from them when it comes to the baby. Um, so what I'm learning, because the way that I've always seen myself is, I have the tools and the knowledge to potentially reduce the amount of stillbirth and or infant death. And that it would be my job. But I'm starting to listen from a different perspective of what's going to cause the most amount of trauma for women. And both matter, but I never listened the other way. And I really do think that working alongside these women who are attending these unassisted births could be more helpful than shutting them down and getting them in trouble. One of the clients said, I didn't want a midwife who would just be documenting the entire time she's there with me at my home birth. So I want to dig into that a little bit more with her and learn more about that. But this is her experience and her feeling. And I'm really seeing that women have intuition. And the more I feel into people's intuition, the more that I see that it's evidence-based. So as I'm digging into that, we'll see. We'll see. I can't promise anything. But yeah, like the question really should be, what do women want? And how can we keep them safe? It shouldn't be about getting other people in trouble. And, another thing that someone said was, I didn't want the decisions that I make for myself to get a midwife in trouble. So these women know what they're talking about. Because when you think about all the midwives who offer choice, like it's my colleagues are saying that they're being asked like why did this client decline the glucose testing screening? Like this is what midwifery is. Midwifery is a knowledge that a woman can decline any test or accept any test, right? After informed discussion. What will happen if the test comes back positive? What will happen if the test comes back negative? What is the true false positive? What is the true false negative? Like all of these things should be discussed with clients. That's what midwifery is. It should be in the illness care, like in the full spectrum of the illness care, non-care. But like it's like becoming so minute. Like these things that used to be choice are not anymore. So there's so much, and there's so much to dig into. When we think about before, I don't know about right now, the midwives can tell me, but midwives had a very low rate of being sued, um, in comparison to the rest of the illness care system. Like for the amount of people, not because we're a lower, smaller group, but for the amount. And that was because we were offering choice and empowering and informing. And so there's a really big aspect that's like really it provides safety for both the clinician and the client in terms of bad outcomes and that sort of thing when client make decisions and they're well informed, um, and making complaints about one another because someone is offering choices common. And the reason why we do it from an ancestral lineage point of view, there were all these a long time ago midwives were um, being burnt, right? They were being burnt at the stake by the Catholic Church, and because they were offering care that actually helped women. And the monks, the Catholic men who were treating people with dung. And then that evolved with treating people by bleeding them. So when we would treat people with herbs and things like that, it would actually help them because those things actually still help. Herbs are the second most nutrient dense foods that humans can eat. And even putting food on our skin, like potatoes, which is not an herb, but potatoes on an infection helps. Putting like a sack of herbs on some part of our bodies could probably help as well. So ancestrally, we actually, when we were caught or when we were tortured, we were tortured for no reason, and we had to name another woman to get out of the torture. We were telling on each other. We were tattletaling to get ourselves out of trouble. Don't hurt me. I'll tell you who it is. And then that's continuing. So there's different things that can be done here at the college level, hopefully, and all the other, because there's so many levels of complaints that can happen. things have to be done fairly. And fairly could be different than what we are doing. I'm not sure exactly, actually. Um, People need to be told if they do a complaint that was from a purpose of wrongness and wanting to control, we need to do something about that. It can't happen again. Um, we need to have better education on providing information to clients. And what does informed choice really mean? What does that pillar, that midwifery pillar of informed choice, mean to us now? So it means something really different to me. That's why I'm self-exiled. Being in trouble all the time is not for me. Speaking is for me. um, so there's lots of things to think about, lots of perspective changes that I have to do. And hopefully will guide people to look different ways now. You know, the adverse outcomes are increasing, so what we are doing, it needs to change. It's not an option. So we can start listening. We can start listening, start looking, um, especially in what has happened in the last 10 years. 10 years are really fertile of things, of increase in fear because of the system that we've relied on. Um, yeah, lots of things to think about. And contemplation, I need to start looking at that. I'm not a fan of like the whole victim thing. It's not conducive to moving forward. The victim thing is actually really helpful in removing ourselves from a place, removing ourselves from a place of work, relationship, and those sorts of things. And then we build boundaries and we tell ourselves it's never going to happen to us ever again. So that victim sort of state kind of remains. But then there's no moving forward from that place if we stay there. So seeing the woman as a victim and of the circumstances, especially in Canada, it just doesn't work for me. I want to move forward. I want something to change. There are other places in the world where I may not get to speak the way that I do or any other woman does, and we're not little, we're not small. We don't have to be. No one owns our bodies, and that is the law. And so, yeah, like I'm looking for all the solutions and I want to step into them, into building a healthier society, because it's not just maternal death that's increasing, it's a mortality overall. And it's not based on like the aging society. This is like beyond that. So we have a lot to think about. Um, yeah. Okay.